Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. In today's episode, I'm going to be doing a food and wine pairing. I'm going to be pairing vegan croissants with port. First of all, I've got a confession to make. I completely misled you. This video is not about pastries and port. Although it is going to be about a wine that tastes like port, is made from the same grapes as port, and is made in the same way as port. So why isn't it called port? Because it was made in South Africa. Port originally comes from Portugal, and specifically in the Douro Valley, which is in the northern part of the country. It's made in a variety of styles, but most people know it as the ruby style, i.e. the red style, which is a full-bodied, high alcohol and really sweet wine. But you can also get a white port, a tawny port, and even a dry port, although I haven't had the pleasure of trying a dry port yet. So, how do you make port? Well, first of all, you make wine. What happens when you make wine is that yeast converts sugar in the grapes into alcohol. Now, for a dry wine, the yeast eats all the sugar and converts it into alcohol. But when you're making port, you throw some fortified grape brandy in there to kill the yeast, and then fermentation stops, leaving sugar and only a little bit of alcohol. So the spirit that they add to the fermenting wine to halt fermentation is called brandy, but actually it doesn't taste or look anything like the brandy you might be used to. So this brandy has the dual purpose of stopping fermentation and also fortifies the port. Normally, dried red wines have an alcohol percentage of about 13 to 15, but for port, it's closer to 20. After fermentation has stopped and the wine has been fortified, the wine is then put into oak barrels to mature. Port, in its ruby style, tends to be a full-bodied, slightly tannic, sweet red wine, oozing with flavors like dried fruits, stewed fruits, and even a bit of nuttiness. And sometimes it even has a savory touch. I absolutely love port as a dessert replacer because it's just sweet enough to satisfy your sweet craving, but then you don't have to feel completely full after a big meal. It's also perfect drinking for the cold winters. Right, onto the port that we are going to be tasting today. So it was around the end of 2011 that South African port makers, and in fact any port maker outside of Portugal, could no longer market their wine as a port. Instead, they had to call it something else. And in the Cape, lots of winemakers started calling their port Cape Ruby. That is, if the port was made in a ruby style. The port I have with me today is the Vergenoegd Old Cape Colony Cape Vintage from 2007. Now, if you come from outside South Africa, don't even try and attempt to pronounce that name. I struggle, and apologies if you have no idea what I'm talking about. So, Vergenoegd is based in Somerset West. That's about 30 to 40 kilometers outside Cape Town. Vergenoegd is famous for its duck parade. So what happens is, twice a day, an army of 1,000 ducks swarm past visitors. But the ducks aren't just for show. The ducks actually are workers of the farm. So what the ducks do is they eat the snails that would otherwise be attacking the vines in the vineyard. I do talk a little bit about this in my documentary about Avondale that also uses ducks as a preventative mechanism in the vineyard, rather than using really, really harsh chemicals that might destroy the vines and leave the wines with an unpleasant taste. Another thing that Vergenoegd has sent me is this box of absolutely amazing vegan croissants. So, I'm going to taste the port and then taste the croissants and see how delicious they are together. Pouring out my port. Wow, that is a beautiful color. It's a lot clearer than I have seen other ports to be, and it's got a slight garnety, even with a touch of orange color. That's a very interesting smell. It's got a slight hint of paraffin, which I don't think is a bad thing. And it's actually got a very, very fresh, youthful smell. I've had a lot of ports in the past that have more of a kind of musky, really aged smell. Definitely some kind of frangipani, almond essence, orange blossom thing going on as well. Oh, really, really special. So, full-bodied, but maybe slightly veering towards the more medium-bodied kind of port style. Very, very fine silky tannins, and it's got a very kind of caramelized flavor. The savory aromas that I mentioned just a few minutes ago, they're also quite present in this wine. Cool. On to trying the pastries. They have given me two types of croissant. There's the plain croissant and also a delicious chocolate-filled croissant. Okay, so you might be wondering, how do you make a croissant vegan? Because normally croissants are like 95% butter, and obviously butter comes from cows, which is not vegan. So the really amazing chefs at Vergenoegd, they have made these vegan croissants out of flour, soya milk, vegetable fat, yeast, sugar and salt. Let's have a bite. There you go, nice healthy portion size. That's really delicious. Now, in my experience with croissants, you've got the kind of really, really light, flaky ones that you can't eat without getting crumbs all over your face and down the front of your clothing. But these ones are made in more of a kind of brioche style. So it really is a personal preference if you prefer the flaky versus the more bready style. If I hadn't known that these weren't vegan, I wouldn't have actually been able to tell. Now let's have another little bite and then another sip of port and see how they go together. So pastries and port, not your usual food pairing combination, but I think they pair wonderfully together. I think the flavors in the croissant aren't obtrusive enough to get in the way with the quite delicate flavors of the port. So if you're looking for a slightly unusual pairing and you feel like being decadent and having a port at breakfast or having a croissant for dessert in the evening, I think it's a wonderful combination. Thank you so much to Vergenoegd for making this amazing port and for making these amazing, delicious croissants, and huge compliments to the chef and their team. Thank you for watching my video, everyone. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up, and I would love it if you commented as well. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter if you want some more daily wine updates, and I'll see you next time. Bye guys, and happy drinking.